I was sitting in my doctor's office staring at the positive pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 3 months after giving birth to my daughter Emma, I was pregnant again. The room felt like it was spinning as I tried to process this impossible news. I had been taking birth control pills religiously every single morning at 8 a.m., never missing a dose. Dr. Rodriguez was explaining that birth control was not 100% effective, but something felt terribly wrong. I knew my body, I knew my routine, and this should not have been happening. Before I tell you how I discovered the shocking truth about what my mother-in-law did to my body and my family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever dealt with toxic in-laws, smash that like button, because you will relate to every word of this nightmare. What I found out next will make you question everything you think you know about family boundaries. Let me take you back to how this all started, because understanding my family dynamic is crucial to this story. I married Jake 2 years ago, and we had just welcomed our beautiful daughter Emma 3 months earlier. At 26, I was working remotely for a marketing company and was currently on maternity leave, trying to adjust to life as a new mother, while dealing with the physical and emotional challenges that come with caring for a newborn. Our little family was struggling financially after Emma's arrival. The medical bills from the delivery, combined with my reduced income during maternity leave, had put a strain on our budget. We had agreed that we wanted to wait at least 2 years before considering another child, both for financial reasons and to give my body time to properly recover from pregnancy and childbirth. That is where my mother-in-law Dorothy comes into the picture. Dorothy was 58 years old, a widow who had been living alone since Jake's father passed away 5 years earlier. She lived about 20 minutes away from our small apartment, close enough to visit frequently, which she absolutely did. Dorothy had made it very clear from the moment Emma was born that she considered herself an expert on child rearing, having raised 3 children of her own. Dorothy had a key to our apartment which Jake had given her years before we got married, and she used it liberally. She would show up unannounced at 7 in the morning, letting herself in to help with Emma while I was still in my pajamas, exhausted from the night feedings. While I appreciated some help, her constant presence felt more intrusive than supportive. Every morning I took my birth control pill at exactly 8 a.m., keeping the pill pack in a small basket on our kitchen counter next to my coffee maker. It was part of my daily routine. Wake up, feed Emma, make coffee, take my pill. Dorothy was almost always present during this morning routine, having arrived early to help with the baby while Jake left for work at his construction job. The pattern had become predictable. Dorothy would arrive by 7:30, make herself comfortable in our kitchen, and begin her daily commentary on how I was caring for Emma. She had opinions about everything: how often I should feed the baby, how long Emma should nap, what clothes she should wear, and especially about our future family plans. Babies need siblings close in age for proper development, Dorothy would say regularly, bouncing Emma on her hip. My children were all born within 3 years of each other, and look how well they turned out. Emma is going to be lonely without a little brother or sister to play with. Jake and I had discussed this extensively, and we were firm in our decision to wait. We wanted to be financially stable. I wanted to return to work and establish my career. And most importantly, I needed my body to fully recover. But Dorothy seemed unable to accept our timeline. "You are not getting any younger, Lucia," she would remind me constantly. "Women your age should not wait too long between pregnancies. It becomes harder the older you get, and Emma needs a sibling while she is still young enough to bond with them." Her comments made me uncomfortable, but Jake always defended his mother's involvement. "She just wants to help," he would say when I expressed frustration about her daily presence. "She loves Emma, and she loves us. We should be grateful to have family support." The pressure from Dorothy was constant. She would bring up the topic of when we would have another baby during every visit. She questioned my decision to return to work, suggesting that I should focus on being a mother instead of pursuing a career. She made subtle comments about how Jake deserved to have the large family he had always wanted. What made it worse was that Dorothy had started treating Emma more like her own grandchild than mine. She would make decisions about Emma's care without consulting me, change her outfits when she did not approve of my choices, and even had strong opinions about my breastfeeding schedule. When I tried to establish boundaries, she would become defensive and remind me that she had successfully raised 3 children. The stress of dealing with Dorothy's constant presence and opinions, combined with the normal challenges of new motherhood, was taking a toll on my mental health. I was already dealing with postpartum hormones, sleep deprivation from Emma's frequent night wakings, and the physical recovery from childbirth. Dorothy's pressure about having another baby immediately felt overwhelming and inappropriate. But I never imagined that her obsession with expanding our family would lead her to take matters into her own hands in the most violating way possible. When Dr. Rodriguez confirmed my pregnancy that day, my first call was to Jake. His reaction mirrored my own shock and confusion. "But you take your pills every day," he said, his voice strained with stress. "How is this possible?" "I do not know," I replied, sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, trying not to cry. "I have never missed a dose. Something is not right about this." When I got home, Jake was already there, having left work early. He seemed more angry than concerned, and his first words cut deep. "Are you sure you have been taking them consistently? Maybe you forgot a few days during those rough nights with Emma." His accusations stung because I knew how careful I had been. The implication that this was somehow my fault felt like a betrayal when I needed his support most. That evening, after Jake went to bed, still frustrated and confused, I found myself staring at my birth control pack on the kitchen counter. Something nagged at me, a feeling that I could not quite identify. I picked up the pack and examined it closely under the kitchen light. A few of the pills looked slightly different. The color was just barely off, more of an off-white than the usual bright white. I thought maybe I was imagining things due to stress, but the feeling persisted. The next morning, I called the pharmacy where I filled my prescription. "Hi, this is Lucia Martinez. I am calling about my birth control prescription. Have there been any issues with the quality or consistency of the pills in recent batches?" The pharmacist assured me that there had been no quality control issues and that all their medications came directly from the manufacturer. But she suggested that if I suspected something was wrong with my pills, I should bring them in for examination. Instead of going to the pharmacy, I decided to take a few pills to an independent lab for testing. I had to know for certain what I was dealing with. The results came back 3 days later and confirmed my worst fears. Several of the pills contained only lactose milk sugar with no trace of the hormones that were supposed to prevent pregnancy. Someone had carefully replaced random pills throughout the pack with convincing fakes. My hands were shaking as I processed this information. Only one person had regular access to my medication, someone who was present in my kitchen every single morning when I took my pills. Dorothy. I needed proof before I could accuse anyone of something so serious. I set up a small hidden camera in our kitchen positioned to capture the counter where I kept my birth control. The camera was motion-activated and would record whenever someone entered the area. The footage I captured over the next week was more damning than I could have imagined. Dorothy arrived each morning as usual, but on the 3rd day after Jake left for work, and while I was in the bedroom feeding Emma, she opened my pill pack. I watched in horror as my mother-in-law carefully removed several pills from different points in the cycle, replacing them with identical-looking tablets from a small container she carried in her purse. She was methodical and practiced, clearly having done this before. She even counted the pills to ensure that the number was correct, so I would not notice any missing. The violation felt overwhelming. This woman had been tampering with my medication for weeks, possibly months, deliberately sabotaging my reproductive choices. She had invaded my body's autonomy in the most intimate way possible. But I needed more evidence. I searched Dorothy's purse the next time she visited, finding a small prescription bottle containing lactose tablets that she had ordered from an online health store. I also discovered printed pages about birth control effectiveness and how hormonal contraception could be rendered ineffective. Dorothy had researched this. She had planned this. This was not a spontaneous decision, but a calculated campaign to force me to become pregnant against my will. When I confronted Dorothy with the video evidence, her initial reaction was complete denial. "That is ridiculous, Lucia. Why would I do something like that? You are being paranoid because of your hormones." But when I showed her the footage on my laptop, her face changed completely. The color drained from her cheeks as she watched herself tampering with my medication. "I was helping you have the family you deserve," she said finally, her voice defensive rather than apologetic. "Emma needs a sibling, and you two are too selfish to see that. I was just helping nature along." The casual way she dismissed the violation of my body was almost as shocking as the act itself. She genuinely believed that her desire for more grandchildren justified tampering with my reproductive health. "You cannot make reproductive decisions for other people," I said, my voice rising with anger and disbelief. "This is my body, my choice, my family. You had no right to do this." "I have every right to want what is best for my son and my granddaughter," Dorothy shot back. "You are being dramatic. Women have been having children close together for generations. It is natural and healthy." When Jake came home that evening and I showed him the evidence, his initial reaction was disbelief. "Mom would never do something like that," he said, staring at the video footage. "There has to be some explanation." But as the reality sank in, I could see the horror growing in his eyes. His mother had violated his wife's body and autonomy. She had made reproductive decisions for us without our consent. She had treated me like a breeding animal whose only purpose was to provide grandchildren for her enjoyment. The trust between us and Dorothy was shattered completely. But what came next would test whether Jake would choose to protect his wife or continue enabling his mother's controlling behavior. The first thing I did was consult with a lawyer who specialized in reproductive rights. What Dorothy had done was not just morally wrong, it was potentially criminal. "This constitutes reproductive coercion," attorney Sarah Kim explained during our consultation. "Tampering with someone's medication, especially birth control, can be charged as assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and in some states, even sexual assault. What your mother-in-law did is a serious felony." The legal implications were more severe than I had realized. Dorothy had not just interfered with my family planning. She had committed crimes that could result in prison time. Attorney Kim walked me through the process of documenting everything for potential criminal charges. Meanwhile, the medical consequences of Dorothy's actions were becoming clear. When I explained the situation to Dr. Rodriguez, her concern was immediate and serious. "Becoming pregnant again so soon after giving birth puts you at significant risk," she explained. "Your body has not had time to replenish essential nutrients like iron and calcium. You are at higher risk for anemia, bone density loss, and pregnancy complications. This pregnancy will be classified as high risk, requiring additional monitoring and care." The physical toll of Dorothy's decision was affecting not just my current health, but potentially my long-term well-being. My body was already depleted from pregnancy and breastfeeding Emma, and now it was being asked to support another pregnancy before it had recovered. The emotional impact was equally devastating. The violation of my bodily autonomy had triggered symptoms similar to those experienced by assault survivors. I felt like my body was no longer my own, that my most basic rights had been stripped away by someone who claimed to love me. Jake was struggling to process his mother's actions, caught between his loyalty to her and his responsibility to protect his wife. When I insisted that we tell his extended family what had happened, he initially resisted. "Maybe we can handle this privately," he suggested. "Mom made a mistake, but involving everyone else will just make it worse." But I was not interested in protecting Dorothy's reputation. Her actions deserved consequences, and I needed support from people who understood the severity of what she had done. When we told Jake's sister Amanda and his brother Marcus what had happened, their reactions were mixed. Amanda was horrified and immediately supportive. "Oh my God, Lucia, I am so sorry. What Mom did is absolutely unforgivable. That is not helping. That is assault. But Marcus was more defensive of their mother. Look, I am not saying what Mom did was right, but she probably just wants more grandchildren. You know how she gets about family. Maybe you are blowing this out of proportion. The family split was painful, but revealing. It showed me who understood the concept of bodily autonomy and who was willing to excuse criminal behavior because it was committed by a family member. Jake was finally forced to confront his mother directly. He went to her house and demanded that she acknowledge what she had done and agree to get professional help. "Mom, what you did to Lucia is unforgivable," he told her. "You violated her body and our marriage. You need to get therapy and make this right, or you are not going to be part of our lives." Dorothy's response was telling. Instead of apologizing or showing remorse, she doubled down on her justification. "I do not need therapy for wanting grandchildren," she said. "I need a son who appreciates that I was looking out for his family's future. That woman has you wrapped around her finger, and now she is turning you against your own mother." That conversation was the turning point for Jake. He finally understood that his mother was not going to acknowledge her wrongdoing or change her behavior. She viewed what she had done as justified, and me as the problem for not accepting it. I filed a police report the following week. Officer Patricia Gonzalez took my statement and examined all the evidence I had collected. The video footage, lab results, and medical documentation painted a clear picture of reproductive coercion. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of medication tampering I have seen," Officer Gonzalez told me. "We will be pressing charges for assault, reckless endangerment, and tampering with a controlled substance. I also obtained a restraining order to keep Dorothy away from our family. The legal document prohibited her from coming to our home, contacting me directly, or being alone with Emma. The restraining order was necessary to protect us from further violations." Dorothy's reaction to the legal consequences was predictable. She could not believe that family would turn on family and accused me of destroying her relationship with her son and granddaughter. She sent messages through mutual friends claiming that I was unstable and vindictive, trying to paint herself as the victim. The story attracted attention from local media because reproductive coercion cases were still relatively rare in the legal system. The unusual nature of a mother-in-law tampering with birth control to force pregnancy made it newsworthy, though I chose to keep my identity private. Dorothy was eventually charged with assault and reckless endangerment. Faced with potential prison time, she accepted a plea bargain that included 18 months of probation, mandatory counseling, and a permanent no-contact order with our family. I also filed a civil lawsuit against Dorothy for the medical expenses related to the high-risk pregnancy therapy costs for the emotional trauma and damages for the violation of my reproductive rights. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover the lawsuit because it involved intentional criminal acts, leaving Dorothy personally liable for the damages. The financial impact on Dorothy was severe. Between legal fees for her criminal defense and the civil judgment against her, she was forced to sell her house and downsize to a small apartment. The woman who had thought she could control our reproductive choices was now dealing with the real-world consequences of her actions. But the most satisfying part of the justice process was watching Dorothy finally face accountability for her behavior, after years of Jake making excuses for her controlling tendencies. One of the most difficult decisions Jake and I faced was what to do about the pregnancy that resulted from Dorothy's manipulation. After extensive counseling and medical consultation, we decided to continue the pregnancy, but with strict boundaries about family involvement. This was our choice to make, not Dorothy's, and we were determined to reclaim our autonomy over our reproductive decisions. We arranged for high-risk obstetric care to monitor my health throughout the pregnancy and ensure the best possible outcome despite the challenging circumstances. Our marriage required intensive repair work. Jake had to confront years of enabling his mother's controlling behavior and learn to prioritize our family unit over keeping peace with his extended family. We started couples therapy with Dr. Michael Chen, who helped us establish healthy boundaries and communication patterns. You have to understand that your mother's approval is not worth your wife's safety and autonomy, Dr. Chen told Jake during one of our sessions. Marriage means choosing your spouse's well-being over all other relationships, including the one with your mother. It was a difficult journey, but Jake gradually learned to recognize the patterns of manipulation and control that Dorothy had used throughout his life. He began to see how her behavior had affected not just our marriage, but his previous relationships as well. Dorothy's criminal conviction had far-reaching consequences beyond the legal penalties. Her church congregation learned about her actions, and many members distanced themselves from her. Neighbors who had once considered her a pillar of the community began to see her differently. The social isolation was perhaps the most difficult consequence for Dorothy to accept. Her attempts to maintain relationships with Jake's siblings were complicated by the family's knowledge of what she had done. Amanda completely cut contact with Dorothy, appalled by her mother's violation of my rights. Marcus continued to have limited contact, but with strict boundaries about discussing our family. For my own healing, I began individual therapy with Dr. Lisa Martinez, who specialized in trauma related to reproductive coercion. The work was challenging but necessary to process the violation and reclaim my sense of bodily autonomy. What your mother-in-law did was a form of intimate assault, Dr. Martinez explained. She used her access to your home and your trust to violate your reproductive health. The trauma you are experiencing is valid and needs to be addressed. I also joined a support group for women who had experienced various forms of reproductive coercion. Hearing other women's stories helped me understand that Dorothy's behavior was part of a larger pattern of control that many women face from family members who feel entitled to make reproductive decisions for others. My pregnancy progressed with excellent medical care, but the high-risk status required additional monitoring and precautions. Jake was incredibly supportive throughout attending every appointment and ensuring that no family pressure interfered with our medical decisions. When our son Marcus was born healthy and full-term, it felt like a victory over Dorothy's attempts to control our family. We had made the choice to continue the pregnancy on our own terms with proper medical care and emotional support, rather than being forced into parenthood according to someone else's timeline. The birth of Marcus also marked a clear boundary. Dorothy would have no unsupervised access to either of our children. Any future contact would be supervised and conditional on her demonstrating genuine accountability for her actions. My advocacy work began naturally as other women learned about my story. I started speaking at workshops about recognizing and responding to reproductive coercion, helping other women identify when family members or partners were attempting to control their reproductive choices. The legal precedent set by Dorothy's conviction helped other victims pursue justice in similar cases. Reproductive coercion was gaining recognition as a serious crime, and my willingness to pursue legal action had contributed to that awareness. 2 years after Dorothy's conviction, she completed her court-ordered therapy, but the reports indicated limited progress in accepting responsibility for her actions. Her therapist noted that Dorothy continued to view herself as the victim and struggled to understand why her actions were considered criminal rather than helpful. Jake's relationship with his mother remained strained and distant. While he occasionally spoke to her by phone, he maintained firm boundaries about her involvement in our lives. Dorothy was not invited to family gatherings and had no relationship with her grandchildren. The most important lesson I learned through this experience was about the difference between love and control. Dorothy had claimed that her actions were motivated by love for our family, but true love requires respect for other people's autonomy and choices. I also learned the importance of trusting my instincts about boundary violations. When Dorothy's behavior felt intrusive and inappropriate, it was because it was intrusive and inappropriate. Learning to recognize and respond to those feelings was crucial for protecting myself and my family. Our marriage emerged stronger from this crisis because we had learned to prioritize our nuclear family's well-being over extended family approval. Jake had grown from someone who avoided conflict with his mother to someone who actively protected his wife and children from her harmful behavior. The children we have now are growing up in a home where consent and bodily autonomy are respected and valued. They will learn from an early age that no one has the right to make decisions about their bodies, regardless of their relationship or claimed good intentions. Dorothy's actions taught me that the most dangerous violations often come from people who claim they love you, because they use that love to justify their control and manipulation. But real love means respecting boundaries, supporting choices, and putting someone else's well-being ahead of your own desires. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but sometimes you have to protect your child from the village. Dorothy taught me that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who claim they love you, because they use that love to justify violating everything you hold sacred. My body, my choice, and that includes who gets to be around my children. Have you ever experienced reproductive coercion from family members or partners who thought they knew what was best for your body? How do you handle family members who cross boundaries in the name of love? Share your experiences in the comments below, because your story might help another woman recognize when her reproductive rights are being violated. Please hit that like button if this story opened your eyes to how family members can abuse their access to control your reproductive choices, and subscribe for more stories about standing up to toxic family behavior and protecting your fundamental rights. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that wanting grandchildren or having opinions about someone else's family size never justifies violating their bodily autonomy. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that you have the right to make your own reproductive choices free from coercion, manipulation, or interference from anyone, including the people who claim to love you most.